Fitbit has been on the upswing ever since it released their Fitbit Versa. It's still a fitness tracker first and smartwatch second, but everything it's supposed to do, it does it very well. And I still think the Versa is still the best fitness tracker in Fitbit's lineup. But now we have the Fitbit Charge 3. It does almost everything the Versa does, but in a much smaller and inconspicuous package. The new base model Fitbit Charge 3 retails for $150, and the base model Fitbit Versa retails for $200. And in classic Fitbit fashion, both of these trackers have limited edition variants. Besides coming with an additional, more premium wristband, the only technical difference between a base model Fitbit and limited edition Fitbit is a built-in NFC chip, so you can use your Fitbit for contactless payments, similar to what you would see people with Apple Watches do. Personally, I always recommend going for the limited edition variant because you're getting an additional wristband at a discounted rate. So if you want to pick either of these Fitbits up, I'll have links in the description below, and if you use the links, it really helps out the channel. At first glance, the new Fitbit Charge 3 looks identical to the previous Charge 2, and that's not a bad thing. The Charge 3 has a very conspicuous design for people who want to wear a fitness tracker, but without broadcasting to the whole world that they're wearing a fitness tracker. But the Charge 3 does bring some very welcome physical and technical improvements from the Charge 2. First up, it is much easier to remove the wristband on the Charge 3 compared to the Charge 2 and even the Versa. You just press a button on the bottom and it pops right off. So swapping bands is going to be much less of a headache. The Charge 3 also now has a solid state home button similar to what you would find on an iPhone. Fitbit did this so you can swim and track your workouts with the Charge 3 just like you can with the Versa, whereas you couldn't swim with the Charge 2. But perhaps the most notable difference between the Charge 2 and Charge 3 is the new touchscreen. The Charge 2 had a haptic touchscreen, meaning that it wasn't actually registering your inputs like a smartphone does. It was registering the force of your tap. So in order for it to register an input, you had to tap it hard enough. This method did work pretty well, but it did lead to a lot of failed attempts. But the advantage of having a haptic touchscreen on the Charge 2 meant that it was still pretty usable even when the screen was covered in sweat or water. Whereas the Charge 3 now has a traditional touchscreen, meaning that it's going to register your taps and swipes just like any other smartphone and just like the Versa. And using the touchscreen on the Charge 3 is pretty easy, but things do start to get a little tricky when the screen is wet. And this is pretty normal for touchscreens, but as long as you wipe it down, you'll be alright. And just like before, the Charge 3 still has a black and white OLED screen similar to the Charge 2. And this screen is very easy to see even in the brightest of days. But if you are hard of seeing, then you might be better off springing for the Versa. I found that even with the Charge 3's largest text option, some people were still having issues even just telling the time on the Charge 3. But now let's talk about what the Charge 3 can actually do. From an activity tracking standpoint, the Charge 3 can track everything the Versa can. They can both track your steps, calories burned, heart rate, floors climbed, various different workouts, sleep, and they both have female health tracking capabilities. And all of the data that these fitness trackers collect gets sent over to Fitbit's app. And Fitbit's app is still one of the best fitness tracking apps out there. It manages to display your stats in a very easy to read and understand manner, but if you really want to dig in deep and see more detailed stats about your workouts, then you can do that. Now, even though the Charge 3 and Versa are both able to track the same things, we did find slight performance differences between them. Heart rate tracking accuracy between the Charge 3 and Versa is relatively the same, but we did notice step tracking and automatic workout smart tracking was a little less accurate on the Charge 3 than on the Versa. Mainly, the Charge 3 had a harder time automatically detecting when a workout had started and ended, and the Charge 3 on a regular basis did overestimate how many steps were taken or how far a user had ran. And the Charge 3's lower accuracy could possibly have something to do with its lack of a 3-axis gyroscope, something that the Versa does have over the Charge 3. Now, if you're an avid runner, both the Charge 3 and Versa support connected GPS, meaning that if you want to get a more accurate stats about your runs or jogs, then both trackers can connect to your phone and use its GPS so you can map out your runs and get a more accurate pace readout. But this also means you're going to have to bring your phone along. Now, the reason neither of these Fitbits have built-in GPS is because Fitbit wanted to keep costs down, and they also wanted to keep their trackers as small as possible. So if you're okay with bringing your phone along on your runs or jogs, then a Fitbit will be fine. Or if you really need something with built-in GPS, then you might want to look into something from Garmin or maybe even an Apple Watch. Another upgrade the Charge 3 has over the Charge 2 is that it now has an advertised battery life of 7 days versus 5 days. But we found that with all day and night wear and with 1 hour of daily interval training, the Charge 3 is really only good for about 4.5 days, maybe 5 days from a full charge. Whereas the Versa has an advertised battery life of 4 days, and under the same circumstances, it's really only good for about 2.5 days, maybe 3 days from a full charge. And to charge the Charge 3, you have to use one of Fitbit's many proprietary charging cradles. Now, even though having to keep track of this proprietary charger isn't a big deal, I just want to take a minute to say that this is one of our least favorite things about the Charge 3. There have been a lot of times where we've dropped the Charge 3 to charge and only to come back a while later to find that it didn't actually charge because it wasn't perfectly aligned. I just want to point this out because this wasn't an issue with the previous Charge 2, and it's also not an issue with the Versa. And finally, let's talk about what the Versa can do that the Charge 3 can't. Both the Versa and Charge 3 can show you call, text, app, and calendar notifications right on the screen. You can even quickly respond to text with canned messages on both of these trackers, but only if you're using an Android device. But obviously, since the Versa has that larger full color display, you're going to get larger and fuller readouts of those notifications. You can also download third-party apps to the Versa like you would on an Apple Watch, but these apps aren't as fleshed out and there aren't as many apps available compared to the Apple Watch. But if you want to customize your Versa, there is a pretty extensive library of free and paid watch faces. And in general, the Versa's larger screen just makes it much easier to see your stats and navigate through its menus than the Charge 3. But in general, I think choosing between the Charge 3 and Versa these days is mostly about form factor. They both track the same activity stats as one another, but the Versa does it a little more accurately than the Charge 3. But still, the accuracy difference between the Charge 3 and Versa isn't really going to make or break your fitness progress. You're still gonna have to get up and put the work in. The Charge 3 is a good little fitness tracker if you want something small and inconspicuous to help you keep track of and quantify your daily activity. And not to mention that multi-day battery life is still pretty impressive. But still, the Versa is the best fitness tracker in Fitbit's lineup. Key word being fitness tracker. The Versa is a good-looking fitness tracker first and smartwatch second. The fuller notifications and downloadable apps make it more useful for when you're outside of the gym, but I wouldn't go comparing it to an Apple Watch. If you're looking for a smartwatch, get a smartwatch, because since you can't talk to your voice assistant, answer calls, or respond to text directly from the Fitbit Versa, then I wouldn't consider it a smartwatch, and given its price point, that's okay. Some people just want a smartwatch so they can track their workouts, and even though the Series 4 Apple Watch kind of stole the show at Apple's latest iPhone event, its lowest bar of entry is $400. So if you just want something to track your workouts with, then the Charge 3's and Versa's $150 and $200 price points may be more palatable. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. Support the channel by clicking on the links down below, and I'll catch you next time.